recording. So let's get started and talk about healthcare options for immigrants in Illinois. And the American healthcare system, it is a patchwork, right? We've got some government sponsored insurance in terms of Medicaid and Medicare. We have private health insurance that we either purchase ourselves or maybe our employers help us with. Maybe there are people who are uninsured. And in fact, especially among the immigrant population and undocumented population, that uninsured rate is still incredibly high. And in large part, there's many different factors for the uninsured rate in the United States. But certainly a part of it would be is that we don't have a true form of national health insurance or national health coverage like most nations, such as, the British health care system, right, or Canada's system. And this is not a lesson about the different healthcare systems of other countries, but I think it is important to recognize that we do have some unique complexities because of that. And so even for those who are, born citizens in the United States, as well as those who immigrate to the United States, that path to health coverage really depends on what your what criteria you meet. But when we think about immigrants in particular, depending on a number of things, they may have a pathway to all of these. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about Medicaid. We're also going to talk briefly about Medicare. And those are two government programs. I'm going to start off the presentation talking just briefly about Affordable Care Act and employer health insurance and kind of things to think about with that. For those students, even immigrants who attend a university or a college, some universities do offer health coverage. It's actually part of their registration fee, but it varies by university, and it really, there may be additional requirements, whether or not someone is a full-time student or a part-time student, that may be an issue. It may only offer coverage during the terms that the student is attending. So if they only attend for, let's say the fall and the winter/spring semester, what do they do for the summer? But that may be one avenue. But that's about all I'm going to say about university health coverage. So let's start exploring some of these different categories of coverage. And I'll start with employer coverage. Sometimes it's called group coverage, but this is where your employer works with either an insurance agent or broker or directly with an insurance company to offer health insurance plans to you. And there's a monthly cost to having health insurance that's known as a premium. And with employer coverage, that cost is usually shared between the employer and the employee. Some employers are very generous and will cover almost all of the employee's costs, even premiums, but not all of them. Typically, we have something deducted from our paychecks to have that health insurance. Others do offer dependent coverage. In fact, the Affordable Care Act mandated that employers must offer coverage to their employees' dependents, but that doesn't necessarily include spouses. They may choose to cover spouses, but they may not. In fact, my employer, I'll be honest, if our spouse has the ability to get health coverage from their own employer, they will not cover our spouses. And it's simply because of the high cost of health insurance. So what I want to say though about group health coverage and immigrants is that yes, indeed, many immigrants may be able to get health insurance through a job, even undocumented immigrants. It just depends. And they may be able to get it through their own job or even their spouse's job if that job offers spousal coverage. So it depends on the employer and kind of what their offer of coverage is, and if that immigrant is working in a job that offers health insurance. Because sometimes what we know, especially immigrants may work in jobs that more are cash based, right? They may work for an employer that is not necessarily mandated by the Affordable Care Act to offer coverage based on the employer size. Lower wage service jobs don't always come with health insurance, especially part-time jobs. So it just depends. But just know that if that is a pathway, that certainly immigrants may be able to get health insurance that way. And I'll take a moment to just mention DACA briefly. So our our young people with deferred action for childhood arrival status, once they get that in place, they're given a social security number that authorizes them for work. And so we may have many DACA individuals who are working in jobs that they can receive health insurance from. So that's about all I'm going to say about group coverage. And then I can't help but just take a quick moment to mention the Affordable Care Act. And actually, we'll spend a few slides here because, especially for immigrants who are newer to the United States, who have a lawful status, this may be their pathway to health coverage here. So, Affordable Care Act, signed by President Obama back in 2010. The major components of it were implemented in 2014, and really it created this new way to buy health insurance, right? So I say new, but we just finished up the 8th year of open enrollment for coverage through the ACA marketplace. So people can shop for health insurance, and when they're filling out an application for ACA coverage or Obamacare coverage, they're really filling out an application for some financial help to pay for private health insurance. So these plans are offered by insurance companies. Now, each year there's a 6-week open enrollment period. So from November to December, that's the one time a year that if people didn't have health insurance, they can sign up. If they already have a plan through the marketplace, this is the time of year where they can change plans. However, the new Biden administration has designated a special enrollment period that just started 10 days ago, and it will go until May 15th, really in recognition of the incredible strain from the COVID-19 public health emergency. And so it's special enrollment, and if anyone is still in need of coverage, we encourage them to explore their options through healthcare.gov. So it's a special designated enrollment period, and it's pretty broad. They're not going to have to provide a whole lot of proof even that they need it. They can go and check it out. So just a quick word more about special enrollment periods too. I mentioned there's this designated 6-week open enrollment period, and then now there is this special enrollment period I just mentioned. But otherwise, outside of these time periods, if someone has a qualifying life event, such as a marriage or a divorce or a move, and more types of life events, that may allow them actually to change their plans or even sign up for a new plan if they've never been enrolled. Um, there's a lot more information about special enrollments on the healthcare.gov website if you need it. But I think what I want to point out is, let's say you encounter an immigrant later this year, and let's say it's in August, and they just moved here at the end of July, and they don't have a pathway to health coverage. Maybe they're a green card holder, but they're brand new to the United States. In that case, they have an initial 60-day special enrollment period as a new immigrant. So we would encourage them to explore their options here if they don't have another form of health coverage. As I mentioned, the real benefit of applying for help, or applying for financial help through the marketplace, is that it's discounting the cost to have this health insurance. So it's only available to people with income up to 400% FPL at this time. There is some legislation pending that was introduced by Representative Lauren Underwood, who's out in the suburbs in this direction, to try to increase that more. But as of today, it's up to 400% federal poverty level, and for people who don't have another pathway to health coverage. So if you are offered health insurance from your job and you choose not to take it, chances are you won't be able to get the financial discount through the marketplace because your employer is offering you health insurance. If you're eligible for Medicaid, that's your coverage. If you're eligible for Medicare, that's your coverage. You can't get the discount on the marketplace. So I think about the ACA marketplace as really for people who have no other form or no access to another form of health insurance. If you've been with me the last 2 weeks, we've talked about those strict immigrant eligibility rules for things like SNAP and cash, and certainly that applies for Medicaid. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Many people are familiar that green card holders have to wait for 5 years before being able to apply for SNAP or Medicaid. That is not the case with ACA Marketplace and the financial subsidies. You can be a new immigrant, and as long as you are lawfully present, you can access this assistance to buy health insurance. In addition, these subsidies do not count towards any public charge test. We were concerned very early on when the leaked draft came out that that was going to be an issue, but these subsidies were not included in the final rule. So it is not subject to public charge. So these are all the many different immigration statuses that are eligible for the marketplace. So on the left, we've listed, and this actually comes from our partners at the Center on Budget Policy and Priorities. I might have said that wrong. Budget and Policy Priorities, CBPP. They have a fantastic website, Health Reform Beyond the Basics. And so on the left, we've got all of the statuses that are eligible for Medicaid. These folks are also eligible for ACA Marketplace insurance. So if they're over the income limit for Medicaid, they could still get financial help to pay for a marketplace plan. On the right side, we see other lawfully present immigrants. So these statuses on the right side of your screen may not be eligible for Medicaid, right? But they may purchase health insurance through the marketplace and get the financial help to pay for it. Please note there is an important exception with DACA, however, so that's just something to consider. And then these are some additional one as well. So even if they are applying for these kind of statuses, once they have some of that paperwork in place and that receipt from USCIS, they may be able to go and purchase health insurance here. That is all I'm going to really say about the ACA. Those of you who've been around and who have helped families enroll in the ACA know that we could do 2 days full on training on just the ACA. And I think that's the other important thing to mention is that we still have a workforce out there of navigators or certified application counselors who are licensed to be able to provide this kind of enrollment assistance. So if you are not one of those folks, we want to make sure you can connect to those organizations that serve in your area. And Marisol, I do see your question, and I will come back to that when we get to Medicaid. The short answer is yes. All right, so that is all I'm going to say about employer coverage and ACA coverage for now. But I really hope that if you do encounter lawfully present immigrants right now and through May 15th who are uninsured, encourage them to go and see and check out the plans on the website. You can actually go to healthcare.gov and get an estimate of what it would cost, what plans are in your area without even doing an application. But really the application is all about finding out what your income is and what you're anticipating your income to be, and then what kind of discount you could get. All right, I'm going to talk about Medicare next. I can do a half-day training on Medicare. This is not the Medicare lesson, but I do want to talk about some general highlights and really talk about that immigrant eligibility. And I am still learning with Medicare. So it's kind of a cool program once you get everything in place, right? So it is our health insurance program for seniors and persons with disabilities. So let me just page through here. So to be eligible for Medicare, you have to be a citizen or a qualified immigrant, and you also have to have a work history. So I don't have that listed on the slide, but if you were with us last week and we talked about those earning those work credits for Social Security, it's the same concept here. We've worked and we've paid into the FICA system so that we'll be eligible for Medicare when we turn 65 or if we become disabled. And if we are under age 65 and we are disabled, we have to have either received SSDI benefits for 24 months or been diagnosed with these other conditions, ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, or kidney failure. So there's some special rules around those programs. Oops, I meant to delete the more about each part later, and I forgot. We are not going to get into the details of these parts. I will give you the quick highlights. So when someone turns 65 and they are eligible for Medicare, they basically have two ways to get it. They can go with what's called Original Medicare, and that's where they're enrolling in Part A and B, and then also a Part D prescription plan. Or they can go with a Medicare Advantage plan. And a Medicare Advantage plan is basically HMO style Medicare, where they are able to access their health coverage through an insurance company who manages their care. So, what are all these different parts, right? Well, Part A, if you have a work history, Part A will not have a monthly premium, first of all. And it's really for your hospital coverage. If you need to be hospitalized, your inpatient care, all of that is under Part A. Now, you may not have a monthly premium to have Part A when you have that work history, but if you become hospitalized, there is coinsurance rates and there's a deductible and all of that stuff that comes with health insurance in the United States. Part B. Part B is our outpatient care, our health coverage, like doctor's visits, lab tests, etc. Part B does have a monthly premium. I believe the monthly premium for people who are new to Medicare this year is $148.50 per month, but don't quote me on that. It goes up slightly every year, and now I'm wondering if I forgot it. So anyway, but there is a monthly premium for Part B. If someone's already receiving their Social Security retirement, it'll be automatically deducted out of that. Same thing if they're getting Social Security disability insurance, SSDI. Otherwise, they'll be set up on a quarterly billing for that. If they enroll in Part A and B Original Medicare, they'll get a red, white, and blue card with their information on it. And that's what they present when they go to the doctor. Now, these patients also have to pick a prescription plan, Part D plans, which are administered by private health insurance companies, everyone from Humana, Aetna, Blue Cross, and others. United, I think, is another. And this is really to pay for the costs of your medication. There's a premium for Part D as well. It varies by insurance plan. I think the average is anywhere from $35 to $40 a month for this year. And again, people can, instead of doing that, they can go with a Medicare Advantage plans. And many Advantage plans do include prescription, the Part D coverage too, but not all of them. And there's a lot of decisions around Medicare when first eligible for it. And so I always encourage people, if they have questions, that they should find a SHIP counselor in their area. And SHIP is the Senior Health Insurance Program. So the Illinois Department of Aging has a website with all sorts of information about the SHIP program. It's usually operated either at kind of like agencies that are designated to serve senior citizens or an area agency on aging. So I know like Catholic Charities in the city is one. Age Options in Oak Park. In DuPage County, it's the DuPage County Senior Services that does a lot of this and has SHIP counselors, but we also have Age Guide, which is our area agency on aging. So it just depends on your region. Sometimes some of the township workers are also SHIP counselors. And the reason it's good to connect with a SHIP counselor is because they get this extra training around all things Medicare and can really help families make a decision if they have questions. One other thing I should mention, there's also something known as a Medicare supplement plan or a Medigap policy. And these policies are only available to people who are enrolling in Part A and B, not the Advantage plans. And it's really designed to fill the gaps. That's why it's called a supplement. One of the common things it will cover is when someone's hospitalized, it'll help with some of those co-insurance costs, and then maybe just some other things. Medicare does not usually cover anything outside of the country. And so when people travel, they should be also purchasing travel insurance. So, it's kind of a little bit of a separate topic, but it may be relevant. This is just another way to explain how there's two options. So what original Medicare includes, and then what the Advantage looks like. There are even insurance brokers who specialize in Advantage plans. So the difference between an insurance broker or an agent is an agent usually sells policies from one insurance company, whereas a broker can look at multiple insurance companies. Okay, so those are kind of the real basics of Medicare. But let's talk about that immigrant eligibility for Medicare, right? So I talked about a few things. There's age criteria for kind of retirement, so to speak, for health coverage at age 65, or that eligibility through SSDI. And that means there has to be a work history. And so when it comes to immigrants, the question is, do they have the sufficient work history? Do they have a qualified status? And also, did they work under a number that is their own and accrue their own work history? What I forgot to mention is that anyone, regardless of if you have a work history or not, you can buy into the Medicare program at age 65. So if you are working with a US citizen, let's say, who has no work history, who did not marry and so therefore doesn't have a spouse's work history, at 65, they could buy into Medicare. They would have to pay then their Part A monthly premium, which I think is running at about $419 a month, if I'm not mistaken. So that's for anyone. And so with immigrants, the real question comes down to, well, do you have a work history? And if yes, certainly you're going to get Medicare. And if not, well, you still can buy into the program, but the rules are just slightly different. So essentially, if you have the work history, that means you have no monthly premium for Part A. As long as you have the sufficient work credits and have that lawful presence in the United States, you can get Medicare. And you don't have to have been here a certain number of years or anything. It's really more so that you qualify for the premium-free Part A. However, you can buy Part A if you don't have that work history. And for persons who are not US citizens, they must not only be a permanent US resident, they have to have lived in the United States for at least 5 continuous years before buying into Medicare. So the rules are just slightly different for those who don't have the work history. Maybe not slightly different, right? A lot different. There is a fantastic issue brief from Justice in Aging, and I've given you the link here. It's just really fantastic and gives all sorts of examples throughout. So I would encourage you, if you have a lot of questions about immigrant eligibility and Medicare, definitely download this PDF. And I'll try to even send out that link. I've saved it to my desktop just because I found it so helpful. So here's an example. We've got Natasha, and then this example name has been changed is directly from this issue brief. So I want to give credit where credit's due. But notice, Natasha was originally from El Salvador. She's worked lawfully here in the United States for 13 years. She has temporary protected status. Because she has that work history, her own authorized work history, she qualifies for premium-free Part A at age 65. So she can enroll in both. It doesn't matter that she doesn't have a green card. She still has a lawful presence. And so it's enough that she has that lawful presence rather than a lawful permanent resident status. Let me just double check real quick because I saw a question come in. Okay. So enrolling in Medicare on time is really critical. So when you're turning 65, you actually have a 7-month enrollment period, meaning you have 7 months to sign up. And if you're not already getting Social Security benefits, it's not automatic. You have to like go to Social Security's website. You have to sign up for Medicare, and you can sign up 3 months in advance of your birthday. You can do it the month of your birthday, and you even have a 3-month window after your birthday. But if you want coverage to begin at 65, you really want to time this well. And people who are turning 65, they start getting all sorts of mail, all sorts of marketing material. Some of it looks very official, but most of it's just, it's insurance companies or insurance brokers trying to offer you coverage. Strangely enough, I had a piece of mail arrive at my mother's house in Michigan. It was addressed to me. The insurance agent really messed up because it was my mother who was turning 65. I'm not there yet. So anyway, she's getting all sorts of mail now because they're trying to get her business. The reason why we want to make sure our people enroll on time, though, is if you don't enroll when you should have, and let's say you wait a year to enroll, you're going to have a higher monthly premium for Part B and even D, and we really don't want that. So make sure that they are paying attention. And then if they're getting SSDI, that will be automatically enrolled, and it'll begin, or eligibility for Medicare will begin at the 25th month. It's a lot more detail I could get into there, but for today's purposes, I think I just wanted to remind everyone to make sure that folks enroll when they should. Trying to think if there's anything else. We covered the main thing with immigrant eligibility. Now, sometimes what we find out though is that, especially for low income immigrants, right? And let's say you're working with someone, they have been a green card holder, they've been here at least 5 years, they don't have a work history, they want to now buy into Medicare because they're age 65 or they're age 70. But it's expensive. Maybe it's really expensive. If you add that $419 a month for a Part A premium to the Part B premium of almost $150 a month, people may start getting very concerned that that's just too expensive. And if they are very low income, there is something known as the Medicare Savings Program. And this is where essentially Medicaid will help with those Medicare premiums. So now to get Medicare Savings Program, have to be a qualified immigrant, right? So that is the factor. You're either an LPR for longer than 5 years, or you've got one of those special humanitarian statuses like refugee. But essentially, if you meet the income limits, which are kind of listed below, there's 3 different levels of the Medicare Savings Program. If you have someone who's very low income, they can get help not just with their Part B premiums, but even their Part A premiums if they have to buy into Medicare. So you apply for Medicare Savings Program through ABE. It's one of those programs or benefits to select at the beginning. Now there is an asset limit, and like I said, the income limit is listed here. So here's an example. We've got Jarvis. He has lived, whoops, I forgot to change the name. I was trying to be fun and have a theme with my characters here this time. Okay. So forget about Augustine in the second bullet. This is Jarvis. So Jarvis has lived and worked in the US for 15 years, and he's been a green card holder for that whole time frame, but he did not want to naturalize, did not want to become a US citizen. And if he is turning 65 this year, and he's saying, well, wait a minute, I'm only having a retirement benefit of $1,100 a month, that's just slightly over, very slightly over the AABD Medicaid limits, but he could still get help paying for his Medicare premiums. And that's the takeaway that I want to give you. He meets those residency requirements and the LPR status. So yeah, he has premium free Part A because he's worked, but if he didn't, he would meet all of those standards. And here's Shuri. So she has just sponsored her parents to the US. They're both 75 years old. They've been here for 3 years as permanent residents, but they do not have a work history. So as of today, when you encounter Shuri and her parents cannot enroll in Medicare today. They don't have that work history. But in 2 years, they'll be able to buy into it. And so depending if their income is very low, they can get help paying for the Medicare premiums. Oh, see, this is what happens when I try to have fun. I try to change the names and then I miss them. However, we're going to hear in a little bit about some other health coverage options for Shuri's parents, especially now in Illinois with our new program for immigrant seniors. And if you figure out my theme of my characters, my attempt at a little fun, you are welcome to enter that into the chat. All right, so just some resources, because I'm always about giving my participants resources. We've got the Illinois Department of Aging, the SHIP program. Here is a very long link, but even if you just do an internet search, you will find it. Even Illinois SHIP program should be enough. Our partners at Age Options. So I mentioned they are an area agency on aging in Oak Park, so in suburban Cook County. They offer regular Medicare and Medicaid training, actually, but they are really experts when it comes to Medicare. So you can check out their website. You can try to sign up for their listserv so you get announcements of their trainings. I think they're actually doing a Medicaid counselor training in the near future. But they usually offer at least twice a year Medicare training. And so if you really are seeing a lot of seniors in your caseload or at your agency, it could be worth getting a little more in-depth training from them. In addition, if you're interested in becoming a SHIP counselor, and some agencies do because that's their population that they see, you can contact the Department of Aging. And then there is a ton of information online about Medicare. So Medicare.gov is actually pretty user-friendly too. I still think the Social Security website might have them beat, but some really helpful information here. And then these are some other resources as well. I personally love Medicare Interactive. You can find a lot of information for free. You can also pay for online training through Medicare Interactive. So I love it. When I have a question that I'm not quite sure on, I usually go there and I can often find it. And then also this Medicare Made Clear, it's actually a pretty user-friendly website too. I just want to give the caveat, it is offered or kind of owned by one of the insurance companies. I think it's United Healthcare. So I just give that disclosure. I'm not affiliated with any of them, but you know, it is offered by one of them, but it's some user-friendly information. I just don't want people to think there's only one insurance company out there that offers Medicare Advantage plans. So with that, that's about all I was going to say about Medicare, simply because, I mean, we could spend easily 2 hours on it. So let me just pause here for a moment. And do you have questions about the immigrant eligibility for Medicare, or did that make sense? And you can enter that in the chat. And while I wait for chat, one more thing that popped into my mind. You can have Medicare and Medicaid both, right? That's our dually eligible population. So that's one thing. You can also still be working at age 65 and still enroll in Medicare. And there's some questions about then whether or not Medicare is primary or is your employer coverage primary. And that will vary by company and vary by insurance plan. So Oksana asks, do you have to apply for the Social Security retirement? You use the word pension, which is the same thing, the retirement before applying for Medicare. Great question. And how do you sign up for Medicare? So let's talk about when people are eligible for Medicare versus eligible for Social Security retirement. For those of you who were with me last week, you may remember Social Security retirement is dependent on your age. You can retire as early as age 62. However, that's a reduced benefit. If people wait till their full retirement age, that really maximizes the amount they receive in Social Security retirement insurance. And for everyone born after after year 1960, their full retirement age is 67. So what does that mean? We turn 65 possibly before we are going to start collecting our retirement insurance. So yes, you can apply. You do not have to apply for retirement before getting Medicare. No, that's the long answer and short answer. Absolutely, we have people, and my mom's a perfect example. So she's on Medicare now because she just turned 65 in January, but her full retirement age isn't until 66 and 4 months. So next April is when she will start drawing her Social Security retirement. And how you enroll, you can apply, you can go to Medicare.gov, but you can go to Social Security as well. I believe you can file it online to get it all enrolled and get it set up. And I'm trying to think. And like I said, if you are already, like if someone drew early retirement or they are receiving SSDI benefits, they will get paperwork in the mail, and that's just that they're being enrolled. And I think they do have to sign something and return it back. So let's see. Whoops. I meant to scroll in my chat. Apologies. Okay, the work credits account for approximately how many years of working? So similar to Social Security, it's that 10 years or 40 work credits. And for Medicare, I believe, I would have to double check, but yeah, I believe I have to double check, Rocio, if because I'm thinking of people with disabilities. People with disabilities at age 21, they only need 6 work credits to get SSDI. I just have to double check the Medicare side of things. And one other thing, at the risk of going into too much detail, and really this is something I talk about in other trainings, but I'll just mention it here. For disabled adult children, or even for spouses, you can end up with even Medicare off of a parent's or another spouse's work history. There's some specific criteria that have to meet, but if that spouse that you're working with or that person that you're working with doesn't have a work history, but they're married to someone who does, they should be able to get both Social Security and Medicare off of their spouse's work history. And the same thing goes for disabled adult children. And Elena, we will talk shortly about undocumented seniors. So I'm going to just hold your question for a moment. And Maggie, I'm so glad you asked this too. So is the person eligible for Medicare if they retired early at age 62? No. So it's another factor that sometimes families have to think about. It might be that they're out of work, that maybe their job prospects, maybe they're just not confident. They decide they're going to retire, or they just want to retire early. Not to tell you too much about my mom, but I think she's learned a lot about Medicare in the last couple of years. And she was talking to some of her coworkers they're already getting ready to retire at 62 and thinking they were going to get Medicare. And I had to tell her, I'm like, they're not going to get it. They can't get it till they turn 65 unless they're disabled. So they were a little shocked by that, apparently. So yeah, if they retire early at age 62, they still have a couple of years before they're going to become Medicare eligible. And if they're no longer working, the best thing to do might be explore Medicaid possibly, or ACA coverage. But yeah, I'm glad you asked that. It's one of those things that doesn't make sense, right? Like all these programs are kind of interconnected, and yet, yeah, we can retire early, but we can't get our Medicare right away. And I think that's especially during the election season. I mean, that's a lot of why you hear about Medicare for all, or expanding Medicare to age 50 and older. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why, is because we've got all these different access points in terms of age. All righty. So let's shift gears to Medicaid. Give me a moment. This is my second presentation, and I had a meeting in between, so I've used my voice more than usual today. So Medicaid, I always debate how much to get into, right? And those of you who've been doing this work for a long time and have seen either my trainings or other trainings know we can spend a lot of time. So I made a judgment about what I'm going to focus on today, but I'm always happy to take additional questions. And when it comes to Medicaid, I'm going to review some kind of core eligibility rules. We'll talk about some of those special programs for immigrants, including the new health benefits for immigrant seniors. I am going to get into kind of income counting, which might be more than some of you need. And then it might be that some of you want more of that kind of information, and we can certainly point you to some other resources for that. But and then we'll talk a little bit about managed care as well. So there's a lot to talk about with Medicaid. And in Illinois, right, we have a lot of different Medicaid programs. This slide doesn't even list all of them. But for the patient or the client, right, Medicaid is Medicaid. But just knowing, depending on their age or their kind of status, if it's a pregnant woman or is it someone who's disabled, they're going to be put into different Medicaid programs. And so I'll go through each of these, but we've got everything from all kids to moms and babies, ACA adult, AABD, all sorts of things. All right, so Kristen did the math here for the income limits. The state has not yet posted 2021 FPL Medicaid income standards. Last year, they didn't post the policy until the end of March. I check it almost every day to see, is it there? But US Health and Human Services has published the federal poverty level guidelines. So I did the math. These numbers may slightly change, but to my best estimate, this is what the 2021 income guidelines should be. And we're talking about all kids first. So all kids is for children in Illinois, regardless of immigration status. And I think most of you probably know that any child in Illinois who meets the income guidelines can get Medicaid, regardless of immigration status. And remember that children's use of Medicaid is not subject to public charge. And I know families are still asking about that. Right before this training, actually, I was on one of our Protecting Immigrant Families Illinois steering committee meetings, and our check-in question today was just, are you still hearing about the chilling effect, about people who are reluctant to sign up for benefits or who want to cancel their kids' benefits? And sure enough, everyone on the call shared that, yes, indeed, we are still hearing these questions. So I just want to reassure that they have specifically excluded children's Medicaid from public charge. Plus, in Illinois, it's state funding that's covering the undocumented children. Now, there are technically 4 different levels of all kids. I've just given you the max income level here, all kids premium level 2. And this, so anyone at or below this monthly income will qualify for all kids, and lower levels of all kids will have, no monthly premiums, no copays. In normal times, all kids, meaning outside of the pandemic state of emergency, all kids level 2 does have copays and monthly premiums. But anyway, what happens is that you may be working with a family with undocumented children, you apply, they get all kids in place, but then what happens when that child turns 19, right? Well, at age 19, now they're going to be reassessed as an adult, and they're being reassessed as an adult for both income and immigration status. And as an adult, that now undocumented 19-year-old can no longer get Medicaid. And if they were over income for ACA adults, let's say they did have a lawful status, or they were a citizen even, at age 19, it's a lower income level. So we will certainly talk about each of these income levels as we go through. Moms and babies, this is for pregnant women, also regardless of immigration status. And I've given you the income limits here again on the right. Remember, these are gross monthly income. Notice there is no household of one. So if it's a single woman, no other children, she's not married, and she is pregnant, she is not a household of one. She is a household of two. That unborn fetus counts for Medicaid eligibility. Technically, this also can cover newborns through age 1, though newborns, if mom is eligible, newborns should be put into all kids at some point, but they'll have coverage immediately under mom's number, so to speak. With all of the Medicaid programs, you must meet Illinois residency requirements. And again, no immigration status, and that pregnancy coverage and that 60-day postpartum coverage is also excluded from public charge. So there is no penalty for that coverage. Now, I will say it's a little more nuanced. So at the risk of causing a lot of questions, let me just say it. You may be familiar with the fact that right now during the pandemic state of emergency, Illinois Healthcare and Family Services, or HFS, is not canceling any Medicaid cases. This includes this population and children as well. And so then people are immediately concerned, well, what about public charge? And our understanding from conversations with PIF Illinois and DHS and HFS is that it converts to state funding then. But I think it's just something to keep in the back of mind for now, that it may need to be looked at. They've assured us that it's state funding past those regular days, but I think there's just been so much going back and forth between HFS and CMS. We want a little more stronger answer. So just please keep that in mind. You will notice that yes, indeed, people are not being canceled during the pandemic state. But normally what happens with moms and babies is that for undocumented women, or even women who are over income for ACA adult Medicaid, after 60 days, they lose their moms and babies coverage. ACA adult or family care, here's where some of the requirements change. And essentially this is, whether it's family care or ACA adult, that doesn't necessarily matter so much. Just so you know the difference, family care is for those adults age 19 to 64 who have children in their household, whereas ACA adult basically is no dependent children in their household. So adults age 19 to 64, you can even be a disabled adult, but if you're not yet on Medicare, then they'll put you into this category of Medicaid first. You do see this is the first time we're seeing now, you must be a citizen or a qualified immigrant to get this category of Medicaid, and your income has to be at or below this in 2021. So it just went up slightly. I think it was $14.37 a month for a single person in 2020. And then AABD, or Aid to the Aged, Blind, Disabled. This is for adults who are 65 and older, or those adults who are blind or disabled. And typically that means the disabled population that's on Medicare. But there's some special factors there, and especially when working with disabled adult children. And if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you offline about that. Meaning they're sometimes assessed and put into ACA adult first, but their parents' income may count for that category, whereas the parents' income wouldn't count here. And so really, with the disabled adult children, there's some just special rules as to whether or not they're going into ACA adult or AABD. But it's worthy of at least 10 minutes of discussion, and we just don't have time for that today. So back to AABD. So our seniors or persons with disabilities, they're on Medicare. This is our dual eligible population for the most part. Again, must meet citizenship requirements. So they're either a citizen or a qualified immigrant. And here's our 100% federal poverty level income limit, at or below that. This is also the category of Medicaid that has asset limits or resources. And so they are limited to, as a single person, $2,000 in terms of assets. There are certain things that the state will not count. They don't count one home that you live in. They don't count one car, but they'll count money in the bank and savings and different things over those limits. Now, if they are above the 100% FPL income level, this population can be put into the spend down program. And let me see, I don't think I was planning to talk about spend down today, though I know it could be relevant, especially if you're working with immigrant seniors who might be at or above this income limit. So essentially, the short version of spend down is it's a program for the medically needy. And if people are over this income limit, let's say you've got a single person and they actually are receiving $1,400 a month in Social Security retirement, they're technically $400 over the income limit for AABD Medicaid. But if they have $400 a month in medical bills and expenses, they can use those bills, and basically the state reduces that gross income by the amount of their medical bills to a point where they can have Medicaid. Spend down on its own is its own training. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. And if we have time, we can certainly come back to that. And some of you are probably more experienced with the current process of spend down, and it probably varies by local DHS office. So we're just going to let that be for now. So those are your core Illinois Medicaid programs, but look at all of these special Medicaid programs. And I really want to focus, we talked 2 weeks ago about VTTC, but I'm including those slides again today in case some of you weren't with us that day. I'm going to talk a little bit about the health benefits for immigrant seniors, as well as emergency Medicaid and end-stage renal disease coverage. And then we're going to get into the fun income counting. So remember, VTTC is for victims of trafficking, torture, or other serious crimes. It's really offering protection to immigrants who are seeking immigration relief through either a U visa, T visa, or asylum application. And even if they're in the application process, the pending application or preparing to file an application for one of these forms of protection, that's really what the key is. Then they can maybe get state benefits. They have to meet the income rules and any kind of other rules, Illinois residency and so forth. But if they're preparing to file, have filed, or in the process of receiving these visas or asylum, this is a way to get them some state funded cash, food, and medical assistance. And so that's about all I'm going to say. I will say there is a special unit in Chicago that's processing these applications, and here's the email address. And I think a couple of you, at least one person on this afternoon's presentation was with us this morning with ICER, and we heard from one immigrant serving organization who's been having a lot of trouble with VTTC applications. Now she's located in central Illinois, and so we're just trying to figure out what the challenge is, and we gave her some solutions. But the first solution is, when submitting a VTTC application, is to actually email this email address right away, let them know that you submitted an application and which local office it got sent to. And then these folks at the special units office are supposed to pull that application for processing. But what sometimes happens is that the local office might get to the application first and register it, and then they see, oh, well, they don't meet the immigration status, so they deny it incorrectly. It sounds like it's enough of an issue that we as partners, myself, ICER, we're trying to document issues so we can share that with DHS. But this unit should be able to assist in that. Even if the local office denies it, this unit should be able to go back and reopen it from the original application date. If that doesn't happen, we want to be filing appeals. So anyway, just some real world challenges. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say about VTTC. And then the health benefits for immigrant seniors. So wow, they've already surpassed the numbers that they expected to enroll. So this program came about as part of the budget process last spring. And I have to give a huge credit to our partners at Healthy Illinois and ICER and other organizations that really push the state to do this. And so it's new coverage, very similar to the AABD category of Medicaid for low income immigrant seniors age 65 and older. So basically, if they don't have another form of health coverage, they don't meet the federal Medicaid criteria of a qualified immigrant, they can enroll in Medicaid now in Illinois. And during that budget process last spring, they floated a number of what they thought was the estimated numbers who would be eligible. And at the last Medicaid Advisory Committee call, they stated they'd already surpassed that number. So that just shows the need is there. And we are the first state in the nation to cover this population. So that's pretty awesome. Because it is state funded, enrollment in this program should not harm someone in terms of public charge. But from what I understand, that is a common question that assisters and benefits specialists are getting, is that seniors are reluctant or scared to sign up for this program because they are concerned of public charge. And all we can do is reassure them that it is state funded coverage. It's not a form of coverage spelled out in the public charge rule at all. But I get that there's concerns. In terms of the coverage, it's very similar healthcare coverage in terms of the AABD Medicaid program. And even for seniors who might be over that 100% federal poverty level, they could even possibly qualify through spend down. And I actually asked at the Medicaid Advisory Committee meeting last month, I asked for numbers, and they didn't have them then, but they've promised to share those at future meetings, because I just want to know how many folks you are helping that might be over the 100% FPL, and how is spend down working for them? Because if spend down is confusing for us as providers, I cannot even imagine how confusing it is for them as patients. You do apply through ABE just like you would any other Medicaid program. So I see Melissa just asked that question. You can certainly note in the notes section, but DHS assured us that they put the programming into place in IES, but yet at the same time, I know there's been a couple of issues raised on HealthHub saying that folks have been denied because of immigration status, and it's just, another example. They don't necessarily train caseworkers on policy, but yet if the fix was put into their IES system, this should allow them to proceed. So you can apply through ABE or the other ways that you might, like over the phone. When people are approved for this program, they are put into fee-for-service Medicaid for now, which means they can go to any doctor that takes the HFS medical card. They should not be put into managed care right now. The state will evaluate and determine maybe later that will come, but at this outset, at the beginning of this program, they are not. And again, it covers pretty much everything that AABD Medicaid would cover, with some very important exceptions. And the main thing being nursing home care, or the kind of long-term care services, even the home and community-based services waiver programs, they're not covering that. And I think, was it funeral burial expenses maybe also not covered? I'd have to double check that part. So I think this is an important exception to note. And as much as we would like them to cover this service, I also see the other side of it, because we're in quite the budget issue again in Illinois, and nursing home care is incredibly expensive, and home care is very expensive too. And if we're going to cover anybody for even health care, I guess they had to make that decision. That doesn't mean it can't change in the future, but I think the state needs to figure out some budget issues first. Whoops, sorry, my mouse is acting up. So who is eligible? So again, must be 65 or older. So this doesn't address those immigrants who may be disabled, but for Illinois residents 65 and older who are at or below 100% FPL, um, outside of the public health emergency, there will be an asset test. But right now, we're still in that state of emergency, so they are not doing an asset test right now. But be prepared if we ever do have it declared over, that will come into play. And essentially, it's an immigrant who doesn't have a federal qualifying immigration status for traditional Medicaid. So yes, that can be undocumented, and yes, that can be immigrants who are new to the United States, maybe lawful permanent residents under 5 years. I think, is there also maybe TPS under 1 year? I can't remember. They don't spell it out. It's just basically they don't have that federal qualifying status. Now, I know I haven't gotten into income counting rules and household rules yet for all of the Medicaid, but I'm just going to put it here now that AABD eligibility is going to look at relationship to the other people in the home. So this is actually a good slide to keep in mind for a little later when it comes to the Medicaid household or EDGE rules. So for health benefits for immigrant seniors, we're going to be looking at the applicant themselves. If they have a spouse living in the home, that person counts. And if they have children under 18 in the home, those children will count too. Interestingly enough, policy is phrased that the applicant can request that the children not be included, but depending on the household income, it may be in their benefit to have that number because then it's a little higher income standard. So here's just an example. We've got Jarvis again. So Jarvis is 67 and undocumented, and he's living with his spouse who's a US citizen. They have no children in the home. So when he applies, he's a household of 2. And then Wanda, we've got Wanda who's a widow and has been an LPR for just 2 years, and she also has no income. She lives with her adult son, his spouse, their 2 children. And her son is claiming her as a tax dependent when he files taxes. And so in a few moments, when we start talking about Magi budgeting, you might wonder, well, does Wanda's son's income count? And the takeaway is no, because this is using relationship rules, and she doesn't have any children of 18 of her own living with her, and she does not have a spouse living with her. So that's why she's considered a household of 1. But this will make more sense as we get into the next section of the training. So as mentioned, you can apply via ABE. There is no application deadline. There's no set time frame of the year. You can apply at any time in the year that someone might be income eligible. Need to submit the proofs at time of application. Most important usually is income. If they have medical expenses, especially if they're over income for AABD, we want to submit medical expenses then. If they have any immigration or citizenship documents, you can submit those as well. But please know, a social security number is not required. And if they don't have one because they're undocumented, you can leave that blank. You will encounter individuals who may have an ITIN number for tax purposes, the individual taxpayer identification number. It's just for the purposes of filing taxes. Wanda, she may have an ITIN because her son's claiming her as a tax dependent. But if they have an ITIN, that is not something that goes on the application either. I think sometimes people get confused because it does look like a social security number, but it's for separate reasons. And then backdating is allowed. So with many of the Medicaid programs, you can actually request backdating if you had medical expenses in the 3 months prior to applying. So they are able to apply. And that means for those folks who applied in December of 2020, they could actually request backdating to September. But September was the earliest that there would be any coverage under this program. In the ABE application, this is just when you select at the beginning what benefits you're applying for. This is where you would request whether or not someone had expenses, and you would check those boxes and then go from there. And who was it that had the medical expenses? All right. So that's all I'm going to say for now about health benefits for immigrant seniors. I did a training with Luvia from ICER, and I know we recorded that. We can make that available. We created some FAQs around this program that if you don't have access to already, I can certainly point you to that. Trying to think what else. We also have some fact sheets in multiple languages on our website, and I know we've got partner agencies who've got similar fact sheets as well. I think the main thing is just to really monitor and make sure there's not an incorrect denial, and then also to make sure they understand what is covered and what's not. All right. Emergency Medicaid for non-citizens. This is a program that's been around for a while. It also is not subject to public charge. It's specifically excluded. I often think of this program as a way to get the hospital paid, but for someone who's uninsured and who's a non-citizen and would meet all of the Medicaid factors, except that their immigration status doesn't allow them access to Medicaid, they can apply for this if they end up in an emergency room at a hospital. And the state does look at whether or not, the medical condition that put them in the ER, did it meet all of these things. So they actually need to submit medical records or a medical report form with this application. They have up to 3 months after the emergency room visit to apply for this program. I will say most hospitals are proficient with this program and will help their patients apply because they want to get reimbursed for the care, especially emergency room care, right? But in the chance that you encounter someone, we want to make sure you're aware of that. Plus, the state has made COVID-19 an emergent condition. But first, here's an example. We've got Tony, undocumented, uninsured, severely injured, needs immediate surgery. And so because he's uninsured, he can actually apply for Medicaid. And please make sure to put yourself on mute.
Sí, sí, yo me siento bien.
There we go. Sorry, guys. Okay. So he can apply for Medicaid to cover not only the emergency room visit, but because the surgery was related to the emergent health condition, the injury, he can get the surgery covered too. As I mentioned, he needs to submit medical records. There's a form that needs to be submitted. And so this is why it's usually helpful to have the hospital on board. But I know some folks, even some folks who might be on today's training, have that relationship with the hospital where they help with these applications too. Now, if Tony needs physical therapy later, right, to regain full use of his arm, unfortunately, that will not be covered. Emergency medical coverage for non-citizens does not provide ongoing care. So it's just really for that immediate issue. Oh, my son. And as I mentioned, HFS is treating COVID-19 as an emergent condition. So that is just something to consider. We've got a fact sheet on the PIF Illinois website, and we just want to make sure that people will be able to do that. So speaking of COVID-19, there's a question that came in. Is there any information regarding whether Medicaid will cover COVID-19 tests or vaccines? So yeah, there should be, Medicaid could cover it. It could be health insurance, especially the testing. And I have to double check if any of that has run out with treatment, but testing and treatment, even for uninsured, the hospitals received and other healthcare providers were able to request reimbursement from HRSA. So it just kind of depended. The patient who was uninsured, there were some different mechanisms. It could have been Medicaid paying for it. It could have been emergency Medicaid. It could be that the hospital or provider is requesting it from HRSA. HFS gave out a round of CARES funding to help reimburse, but I know that some providers have still been sending bills and such. So I can make a note to be sure to send out. The HFS website has all the provider notices related to this. In fact, a couple months ago, they actually had to issue a provider notice to tell providers to cease and desist from billing patients for testing. And then my understanding is that vaccines are supposed to be free too, and free to the patient. I know there's been some talk about, whether or not there's an administration fee and everything like that. I will admit I am not completely up to speed on all the things that I should probably be for the vaccine. So let me just make a note to get some more information for you guys around that. And if we have time, we can jump over to the HFS website. But yeah, it's supposed to be free, but it's confusing. We also are concerned about with vaccines, making sure not only that there's an equitable distribution, but that people aren't afraid to go and get their vaccine, especially if it's at a site operated by the National Guard, who are there simply just to give the shots. But how intimidating that might be for some families to have to go and you see soldiers in uniform. So anyway. And I'm just reading the question. So Rocio, regarding VAWA, so I didn't mention, but VAWA usually is, once they're granted VAWA, is usually a qualified immigration status, but we've actually had so many questions recently that I sent an email to HFS and DHS, and I just nudged them this week because we want some clear answers, and they haven't responded. They said the policy team will get back to us. So it was, I sent the email kind of on behalf of Fifth Illinois. Andrea Kovach is on the email too. So when we have more information, I will let you know, but I probably need a little more information because sometimes it depends where they are in the VAWA process. And I think there's some confusion too from the point of VAWA and then did she get a green card? And so we're trying, that was a long explanation, trying to get some clarity around VAWA eligibility. So once we have it, I will try to share that out through the usual channels. And then Elena asked if there's a pay scale for COVID diagnosed undocumented clients. A client mentioned she needs further testing, a second EKG for chest pain. So if this is like kind of those lingering effects from COVID, I'm not sure about follow-up care for undocumented. We might need to work with charity care programs. I don't know if other folks have other resources. That is honestly an issue I should have thought about and just haven't. So the good news is the chat's saved, but I'm gonna make a note of that. So let me come back. Famita is your question. I will try to come back to that. And Maggie, I don't know, because once it starts getting into those billing nuances, I am definitely not an expert, but we can try to look into that. I could maybe ask someone at Shriver, like Stephanie Altman at Shriver is often working on the billing provider advocacy type of issues. So that's a great question. I'm curious too. And it could be that, and I'm speculating here, but it could be that it's better for the state to have emergency Medicaid cover that. And if it can be used for that, especially if it was something COVID related, I don't know. It could be just better because again, that new health benefits for senior immigrants is completely state funded. So it depends, but maybe you and I can kind of talk offline about the specifics of that. Okay. Applying for emergency Medicaid can be done through ABE as well. As soon as we mark that a person is a non-citizen in ABE, these are the questions you see, and you can see right away, yes, this is emergency medical, and then we would need to just make sure to upload the information. But like I said, most times it's the financial counselors at the hospitals because they want to get paid, right? And then end-stage renal disease or kidney failure, when a non-citizen needs dialysis and meets the income requirements, they can get this coverage. But please know it only covers the dialysis service to help keep their functioning going. It does not provide ongoing care. It is classified under the emergency Medicaid for non-citizens policy. That's where you would find it in the DHS policy manual. And for now, it's for those non-citizens who do not meet immigration requirements. So those are lots of different special Medicaid programs. So let's shift gear into what I think is the fun stuff, but for other people, it may be too much. And let me just reassure you, as I get into some of these explanations about eligibility, determination groups, or households and income size, household size, all of that, please know you're not expected to remember all of this. It's really how we help the family fill out the application as to how then the state worker uses that information to determine eligibility. So we are going to go into some details here because I think it can be helpful to understand just how these assessments, how these determinations, how these decisions are made. But when we think about overall eligibility for the Medicaid programs, there's three things to really think about. Really, we could even add four. Certainly immigration status, but also income, and now, ever since ACA, tax filing status. Mixed in there is relationship rules too. So I think that's where Medicaid gets a little more confusing than ACA marketplace insurance applications. So first, let's just review real quickly. We've kind of already touched on it in the earlier segment, but remember those special Medicaid qualifiers to get Medicaid for regular, ACA adult, AABD, you need to be a US citizen or a qualified non-citizen. I'm giving you the policy link to the state's DHS policy manual that gets into much more detail about these statuses, including, references to INA, INS, the actual codes and so forth. And then just remember, we just went through all those exceptions, right? So now seniors, 65 and over, children, pregnant women, VTTC, there's all these exceptions. But when you want to know Medicaid qualifying status, these are just some of them. And so many of you are familiar, refugees and asylees, but maybe you didn't know that veterans or active duty military members and their dependents could qualify for Medicaid. So I would encourage you, if you do work with any of these populations, to definitely check out this list. And this really gets to that VAWA question too, and why we're trying to get some better clarification from the state on VAWA. Here is my income chart with my estimated 2021 guidelines, if I did the math correctly. At least it's not third grade math. Let's just say that, because that is something else. Okay, so I've already given you all of these on the earlier slides. And as soon as I see the state policy, we will update our income chart that we often share in Help Hub and in trainings. I just like to wait until DHS posts their official policy, just in case, the rounding up of dollars is a little different. But when we talk about income, the state is really looking at gross monthly income limits. Now, there's this term MAGI that's been around since the Affordable Care Act rolled out. And it's important to understand that most Medicaid programs, but not all, use MAGI budgeting. And this is where now tax filing status is a factor. But it also, MAGI also refers to what income counts. And so really what I want you to focus on is everything on the left here. This is everything that is included in income eligibility for Medicaid. I think in the past, people are familiar with that people don't necessarily have to file taxes on Social Security income. They could, but they don't necessarily have to. But know that all of it counts. And then there are some things that are not included in that income for Medicaid. And I always like to call out child support here, because child support, if you receive child support, that does not count for Medicaid eligibility, but it does count for SNAP eligibility. So our job as assisters, people who help others apply for benefits, is just to report everything and let the state do the determination. And for the most part, I mean, for years now, the system has been programmed to count income for SNAP or Medicaid when it should, and not count it when it shouldn't. So I think, I think they worked out a lot of those issues very early on. In addition, there's certain things that are deducted from the MAGI. So certain things like student loan interest, self-employment expenses, and so forth. Again, we fill out the application and then let the state decide, which is a scary thing to say sometimes, I know. All right, so which programs use MAGI? So I haven't listed the actual programs here, but you can see the different categories of people. So essentially everything except AABD, right? All kids, moms and babies, etc. I'm missing an I down here. On the bottom part of the screen, it's really the AABD program, those dual eligibles, even the former Illinois foster children, they're assessed under relationship rules. Also, the relationship rules, the non-MAGI budgeting is used for things like SNAP as well, or cash assistance. And so what this slide is telling you is, like, at the top, all of these people who are applying, MAGI budgeting is used when doing their eligibility determination, and essentially what matters is the tax filing status. However, there's some exceptions to that, and I think that's what makes Medicaid eligibility so confusing. Whereas with the AABD program, and this includes health benefits for immigrants age 65 and older, it's really only the income of the persons they're legally required to support. And so that's spouses or their own children under 18. Notice there is no asset test for the programs that use MAGI budgeting. So ACA adult Medicaid, family care, all kids, there is no asset test to get Medicaid for those programs. But in usual non-pandemic emergency times, there is an asset test for AABD. And why care about tax filing status, right? Why did they throw this? Wasn't it already confusing enough? Why throw tax filing into it? So the reason why is it really determines who's part of the household, and whose income is used to determine the applicant's eligibility for Medicaid. So let's look at that a little bit more. So when you have someone who's applying, they're going to fall into one of three categories, right? And you might have 5 people on the application, and all 5 people might be number 1 or 2 or 3, depending on their household circumstances. So they're either going to be a tax filer, or they're going to be a tax dependent, or they're kind of neither, right? Or the unknowns. And it's number 3 that really looks at relationship rules. Also, number 2, the tax dependents, there's actually 3 exceptions to the tax dependent rule to determine whose income counts. And if you fall into one of the 3 exceptions, then they don't care about tax filing status anymore, and instead they revert to those relationship rules. So I think the best way to describe Medicaid eligibility anymore is like, well, it could be a combination of using tax filing status or relationship to the other people in the home. And it just depends where you fall. Now, the state uses the term eligibility determination group, or EDGE for short. And I think that is important language to understand because, again, even with those 5 people on the application, they may each have a different edge size. And this hopefully will make a little more sense as we walk through the next few slides. All right, you will find this in DHS policy on Magi budgeting, along with some examples. And I want you to think of it as the three columns. So let's walk through each one and then some examples that hopefully will help it make sense. So the first is the person who is applying is a tax filer. They are not claimed as a tax dependent. Then their edge size, or the number in their household, will include everyone on their tax return. With the addition of, if they are a married couple who lives together, but maybe they're filing taxes separately, as long as they live together, no matter what their tax filing status is, if they're living together, those spouses count. So just keep that in mind. For financial reasons, there are some spouses or married couples who do not file joint taxes, but if they're living together, they count in the edge or the household. Middle column, if they're a tax dependent who does not fall into one of the exceptions listed here, then their household is very similar to the tax filer. It's basically whoever's in the tax filer's unit. So just keep that in mind. However, if you are working with someone who is a tax dependent and they meet one of these exceptions, then these tax filing rules don't apply, and more so it's the relationship to the other people in the home. So what are those exceptions? Well, if you are helping someone apply and they are a tax dependent, but they are not the child of the tax filer, then they would be an exception. So perhaps I claim my niece on my tax return. Maybe I took her in because my brother is just not in the picture. And if I claim my niece on my tax return, well, she's not my child. And so if she's the one who needs Medicaid, they actually, if she applies, they will look at who's living with her. And if she has other siblings in the home, those siblings will count if they're all under 18. And if she had a parent in the home, the parent would count. But since she doesn't and she's just with me, well, then she would be her own household for Medicaid purposes because she's a tax dependent of someone other than their own parent. The other exception is children who are under 19 who are living with both parents, and the parents are not expected to file a joint tax return. So either, spouses married filing separately, or unmarried couples who have the child in common. They have both parents in the home. And so in that case, that child would be looked at with all their siblings and parents in the home. And then the third exception is children under age 19 who are claimed as a tax dependent by the non-custodial parent. So maybe, you've got, whatever the case is, the couple is not together, whether they're married or not, maybe divorced, whatever. Child let's say lives with one parent, but it's the non-custodial parent who claims that child on the tax return. You would think right away, oh, well, it's the tax filer's income we need, when no, actually, that's one of the exceptions to these household rules. And this child's edge, they're going to look at who they're living with. And so it'll be the parent they're living with and any other siblings. So I know this is really kind of confusing to read. I mean, the first couple of times I saw this or went through training, it's like it took me a couple of times to really understand what it meant. The good news is when we fill out the online aid application in particular, we fill it out and we indicate the relationship to the other people in the home as well as the tax filing status. And that is how the state makes the determination. So while this may be helpful for some of you to understand whose income to include, the reality is, as long as we're filling out that application correctly, it'll count the income it needs to based on all of these factors. So let's look at a few examples. I don't know if anyone's guessed my theme yet, but this one should really give it away if the others didn't. So we've got Thor and his spouse, and they're providing support to his father, Odin. And you see a little bit more information, right? Odin doesn't have any income, lives in Waukegan, but Thor and Jane lived in central Illinois in Decatur. Thor and Jane are claiming Odin on their tax return. So if everyone needs health coverage, what is their edges? So I'll give you a moment if you want to just enter that into the chat box. You know, everyone here needs health coverage. So what's Thor's edge? What's Jane's edge? What's Odin's edge? Is it all the same? Are they all different? I should have done a poll. I just ran out of time. I kind of can't believe it. A week has gone by already, but that's another story. So thank you, Oksana. And she's got it. So those of you who might still be thinking or didn't want to chat, that's okay too. But yeah, Thor and Jane's edge is 3 because they get to include their tax dependent as part of their edge for income eligibility. But because Odin is claimed by a tax dependent, or excuse me, is claimed as a tax dependent by someone who is not his parent, he falls into one of those exceptions. And so Odin is a household of 1. So when they look at income eligibility, you know, for Thor and Jane, they'll be assessed under the income standards for a household of 3. And Odin will be a household of 1 or an edge of 1. Darcy, we've got Darcy who's 15, pregnant, lives with mom, 2 younger brothers, has no health coverage, and Darcy's mom is working and earning $2,500 a month. So a couple of things to think about with Darcy's case. One, she's pregnant, so that unborn fetus for Medicaid, that counts, okay? And we don't know why Darcy's family doesn't have health coverage. The income limits are certainly within the Medicaid limits. We've got Darcy's mom, she's got 2 brothers, we've got Darcy, and she's got the unborn fetus. So that's a household of 5 or an edge of 5. So we definitely want to encourage, if we can, see if this family can get coverage. If it's an immigration status concern, you know, we might counsel and educate them around that, especially for the children, that they are eligible. Certainly Darcy is as well. Even if she was over 18, if she was pregnant, she could get coverage during her pregnancy if there was a concern around immigration status. And then the fun one. And I'll just walk through this. And I really just want to take a moment to say, I do appreciate, I know how challenging it is to just listen this whole time. I just, you know, it's really hard to make things as interactive as I might usually like. So I appreciate that, but let me walk through scenario 3. And some of you have seen this before, but I think it's a great example of just how complicated things can get with our families. So we've got Gamora, she's an LPR, but hasn't met her 5-year waiting period yet. She's uninsured, she lives with Peter, who is a citizen. They both work and file their own tax return. So right now, as of today, they are edges of 1, right? For purposes of Medicaid. But if they have a child and they still haven't decided to marry, which, you know, that's fine. They can do that. Sorry, the mouse. Okay. They're not married, they have a child in common now. That changes things. Now they still need to make a decision around tax filing. And in this case, what they've done is they've decided that Gamora is going to claim Junior on her tax return. Because they live together, because they have a child in common, technically Gamora can apply for health coverage for all 3 of them. but really the challenge is what's each person's edge. Now I've thrown in an extra complication here because Gamora is an LPR for 3 years, right? So while pregnant, Gamora can get Medicaid moms and babies if her income qualifies. But after that postpartum period ends, she technically should be moving to another form of health coverage, maybe through the ACA marketplace. Um, so when we talk about their edges, and if we think about that chart of the Medicaid household rules, remember each person's eligibility is individually determined. Oh, this is what I get. Sorry, I totally did not change all my names. Okay, so I'm just changing it now because it's bugging me. Gamora is a household or an edge of 2. She's claiming the baby. Peter, he's still on his own. Even though they all live together, he's still considered an edge of 1. And then Junior is where the case gets really interesting because Junior has both of his parents in the home. He falls into one of those tax dependent exceptions. And so actually Junior is the household of 3. And I actually had made this scenario up. I've been using it for many years. I change the names all the time, as you know. And I've been using it for years, and I've played with the math before to work it out to a point where Junior actually would be ineligible for Medicaid because of parents' income and everything. And then it really happened. I got a call maybe a year, maybe a little more. I'm trying to remember. We were still in our old office. So anyway, got a call from a provider who this was the exact situation that happened. Baby was born. Mom, they had baby, you know, had moms and babies coverage to begin with. Baby was actually born with pretty severe disabilities. They weren't married. Dad made pretty good income, but they never added baby to dad's health insurance through work because they just figured baby, you know, mom had Medicaid, so baby would have Medicaid. And then, oh, the surprise to find out that no, and they found this out at age 1 when the baby aged off of moms and babies, found out that no, the baby is actually over income for even all kids. So we encouraged, and I never did hear what ended up happening with this family because they were like trying to decide, well, should dad move out then? Like, what do we do? I encouraged them to go back to dad's work and ask for a special enrollment because baby's Medicaid was ending. So I never did hear the end result, but you know, I just wanted to share that because here, this was a scenario I made up for fun and played with numbers for fun. And then to actually get the call, um, So anyway, but this happens, and then our families are coming to us for questions like why did this happen this way, or you know, why did my kids get Medicaid and I didn't, or what's the situation? And so I'm hoping that even though this was relatively brief, I'm hoping that kind of walking through these scenarios and these rules help you understand why decisions come a certain way. And earlier I referenced that it's not up to us to remember all these edge rules or household rules, right? It's really how we enter it into the AIM system or application that's gonna dictate how the eligibility determination is made. And this is where those questions are. So right away, the first question we see here with the relationship is, are they filing jointly? Well, no, because Mercer is a dependent. And then who can claim as a tax dependent? You know, then we see who's claiming who as a tax dependent. And it's by answering these questions this way and the relationship to each other that's how the state's able to make that determination. Sorry, it's been a long week. Yesterday, I kept thinking it was Thursday, and here we are. Okay, how do we apply? I think everyone should kind of know this by now, but just in case, the best thing to do, especially now, is to apply online. And if you have proofs, upload them at the time of application. It just makes things go really fast. Or faster than if you were to try to drop off an application anymore at the local office. They're really still discouraging people from going to the local offices due to trying to keep numbers down and social distancing and all of that. You can apply online, but there's often very long wait times with that phone number. And they are supposed to be opening a new call center to start helping with the volume of calls. I'm trying to remember at what point. I haven't heard a recent update. It's supposed to be coming soon though, but I feel like they keep saying that. So obviously the folks who are hired on at the newer call center hopefully will be just doing some of the easier questions, but you can apply online to really manage everything, because then you have the proof. You have the proof of the application and so forth. These are some of the general types of proofs that are required. For the most part, the state can do a lot of electronic data matching, but there might be some things like especially proof of income that really they don't have access to. And for the most part, they should be able to provide proof of Illinois residency. But sometimes I think about, especially some of our undocumented immigrants, maybe, or immigrants even who are newer to the United States, and they may not have their names on paperwork or things like that. And so sometimes those are things that need to be having some special proofs submitted. So whether that's a letter, from a roommate, or a letter from someone else attesting that yes, this person lives in this home. If they have a piece of mail, authorized mail that's sent to their home, that can be used to prove Illinois residency. There is no minimum time frame to have lived in Illinois to apply for benefits. It's not like you have to have been here for 30 days. It could be you apply on day 5, as long as you are expressing that intent to stay and reside in Illinois, and you can provide proof of that, whatever that may be. And then proof of income, I think the challenge sometimes is for individuals who do maybe earn cash income, and how do you prove that? If it's asked for, it could be a letter, a statement from an employer if they have a true employer. It could be their own self-employment type of records, a ledger of some sort that they could use. Tax returns can be used sometimes for income. There's some special rules around when that is, because tax returns could be outdated. If they're using last year's tax returns, really the state wants to know what's your current income in the previous 30 days. Let's see, just reading the chat questions. Hang on. So before I go on, let me just kind of address Mark's question. Is the tax determination done automatically by ABE, or does the caseworker have to make this determination of EDGE manually? And you found if you don't put the EDGE breakdown in the text field, it's almost calculated wrong. So are you talking about, and Mark, you can unmute yourself actually, are you talking about when you're entering it into ABE and the relationship to each person in the home?
So I've had it where if I submit an application with a tax household that isn't a traditional tax household, like having a parent or having a stepchild, sometimes the EDGE is determined wrong.
Oh, interesting.
And they'll count the income for family members that would, like, they'll count grandmother's Social Security income as part of the household.
Okay, so for Medicaid, that shouldn't necessarily be happening. But if they're applying for other benefits, it could count. So I think I would need to look at a few concrete examples to help better guide, and I could also point you to the policy to just see, because it should be calculated based on how we enter it into ABE, right? And based on which benefit. But to be honest, lately I've been hearing of so many strange things happening. Things that are being requested of clients who are applying that should not even be asked. So it just makes me wonder. So I think if we could maybe have a separate conversation, if you have some examples that you could send me, I could share them with other advocates. I would just ask that you de-identify. I don't want to see client names or confidential information right now, but that might help figure out. It should, yeah, it's supposed to be based on the algorithm, the way the IES system is programmed. And so I don't know, without seeing some examples, why they might have done something that way. Interesting. Okay. What happens after application? So we all know, right, that DHS still mails everything. And we also know there's all sorts of mail delays. Either it never leaves the mailroom at Springfield, or it gets lost in the mail for weeks. And anyway, the short answer is that if they have an ABE application, you know, you've submitted everything through ABE, it could take up to 45 days for the application to be processed. Strangely enough, during this kind of remote work environment, they've really done an amazing job on their backlog. They still do have cases pending past 45 days, but not like it used to be. So if you do have someone whose application is pending past 45 days, know that they do have the right to temporary Medicaid coverage until that application is fully processed. They can request that from the local office. State will notify the client via writing. If they are approved, they'll have the HFS medical card in that packet, and they'll also be told, because most people have to enroll in a Medicaid managed care plan. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about is managed care, and it'll be included in their packet of information. But I just remembered, I said I was going to go back to one of the questions. So hang on. So Famida, and I apologize if I didn't quite say your name right. So she had a client who recently obtained benefits, has 2 children, wants to report changes on ABE. That daughter is filing taxes this year, and so she won't claim as a dependent when filed taxes. And the question is, will the daughter lose SNAP Medicaid benefits? Does the daughter need to apply for benefits separately? And daughter just turned 19, but isn't currently working and has no income. So that is a great question, and that's a great process question. And it might be best, maybe let's crowdsource this, because I have a couple of different strategies I would use, but if other people have some recommendations, she certainly should be able to report that on ABE, but I just don't know how easy it is to get through to those nuances. So it might be better to just try to connect with the local office that has benefits. And really, the tax filing is just going to impact the Medicaid. If they're still living together, SNAP is still all considered together. And the reality is, they're not going to cancel Medicaid right now due to the pandemic, but if the daughter's not working, that's not going to be an issue anyway. Now, I will say in non-emergency times, when it comes to Medicaid and when the child turns 19, technically, for many people, they do have to reapply. There's a redetermination process that's usually done. But right now, I think what's confusing a lot of us is that even people that should be aging off of all kids are kind of remaining on that. They're just not kind of making those changes. So when this state of emergency is declared over, there's going to be a lot of catch up to happen. So I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know if I, sorry. Okay. Let's talk quickly about managed care. Just, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. So most populations in Illinois now will have to enroll in Medicaid managed care. And this is where health insurance companies are basically responsible for administering the care of the Medicaid population. In Illinois, we have 2 avenues. One, most people are going into Health Choice Illinois, but if it is a dual eligible, meaning they are Medicaid and Medicare eligible, it's a different set of plans. It's known as MMAI. And all I'm going to say about MMAI right now, because there's actually a lot we could get into with that, but MMAI, if you do have families who are enrolled into that, they technically can opt out of it for the healthcare side of things. So if they don't want to be put in one of those plans, they can opt out unless they need long-term care type of services. And then what happens is, well, they can opt out of MMAI for their doctor's visits and hospital care, but for their long-term care services and supports, they will need to be in a managed care plan. So that's just kind of one of those factors to consider with this population. It is going statewide July 1st. Right now, MMAI is not in all regions of the state of Illinois. So there's some big parts of central and southern Illinois that, you know, they haven't had MMAI. Part of that is, you know, not enough providers and the net plans networks. And so HFS is actually finalizing all of this right now. I think it was either this week or just late last week, they posted the provider notice that it's going statewide. So for those of you who work in other parts of Illinois, just please be ready that the customers are going to start getting notified. So the rest of the presentation, though, I'm going to mainly focus my comments on Health Choice Illinois, which is all our other Medicaid populations. So it's also important to understand, though, there are still a few populations who should not be put into managed care plans. If you are having families who are enrolled in both Medicaid and private insurance, and I think that was a question earlier I didn't answer. Yes, you can have Medicaid and an employer plan or another private insurance plan, just not an ACA marketplace plan. And when you have another form of insurance, that insurance is the first payer. Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. And so if you have people who are enrolled in both Medicaid and private insurance, they should not be put into managed care. But I am working with a woman, a holdover client of mine from a couple of years ago, and this is exactly what happened. They applied for their disabled adult child son, got approved and got the notice to enroll in Medicaid, and the son is on dad's work insurance. And so it's been a back and forth with the local office to get that coded correctly so the son doesn't get put into managed care. So strange things happen. Someone just didn't, I think, code it correctly. It's known as TPL in the state system. If you have people on the spend down program, they should not be put in managed care, because any month that they don't meet their spend down, they don't have active Medicaid. So how can you be in a managed care plan? That higher level of all kids, that premium level 2, that is a group of children who is not put into managed care. And then for dual eligible, so again, Medicare, Medicaid folks who are receiving services like home-based services through a DD waiver. So this is the Division of Developmental Disabilities. These are things like in-home services or ASILA, which is a community integrated living arrangement. Those folks also currently are not put into spend down. And what that means is they don't get put into a managed care plan, and instead they will use that paper HFS medical card when they go to seek care. It's known as fee for service. To find out what plans are in your area, both Health Choice Illinois and MMAI, you can go to the Enroll HFS website. This is where clients should go to explore the plans that are near them. They can also look up the providers. However, this is sometimes out of date when it comes to provider networks. So a couple of options there. One, they can call the plan that they're thinking about enrolling in and double check. Or really the best thing to do is if they have a current provider that they want to keep, that they call that provider and ask, are you still taking patients with this insurance, or do you take this Medicaid managed care plan at all? Right now, people who are new to Medicaid are being auto-assigned, but they can switch. But the theory or the logic behind it, given the COVID state of emergency, the state wanted to make sure people had access to care as soon as possible. So people who are notified, they're told what plan they're going to get put in. and told when their enrollment effective date is. That's basically when does the coverage start with the MCO. And then once a year, they have an open choice period. But let's talk a little bit more about this enrollment. So the effective date of coverage is the first date, that they should start using the MCO to get their care. So let's say I'm approved, what is it? It's the end of the month. So let's say I'm approved March 5th and they get me everything processed really quickly. My coverage will begin April 1, right? Well, from that April 1, if I decide, no, I don't want to be in this plan because my provider is not in this plan, I can contact Enroll HFS to switch plans. I can only do that once, and I can only do that within the first 90 days of my plan starting. So I have a limited window. And if I miss that window of time, I'm locked in for 12 months until my anniversary date in my open choice period. So it's critical that we make sure people are really paying attention, especially if they're new to Medicaid. They're supposed to be auto-assigning people kind of based on, I think, a lot of different things, zip code and prior usage and different things. But I mean, I've even heard stories where a family has 2 kids and the 2 kids get put into different MCOs. So we really want families to kind of stay on top of this enrollment. What happens at the end of the 12 months is that they'll have an open choice period. It's usually 60 days before the anniversary date with the plan. If they do nothing, they'll just stay within the same plan. Now, I do have a note on this slide, but please note redeterminations for Medicaid are not happening right now. But if they were, just know that sometimes people go through Medicaid redetermination and then their open choice period with their plans actually is later. It doesn't always match up. And so we just, again, want to make sure people stay on top of that. Plans have to cover everything that Medicaid would cover. So I just know that sometimes there are some access issues, especially for specialists. We can talk a little bit more about that. The other thing that happens is sometimes providers drop out of plans, and this happens even in the world of employer or private insurance too, that they no longer contract with the plan. When that happens, if you have a patient who's in the midst of treatment, they do have something called a transition or continuity of care. And for most people, it's a 90-day transition. Although those home services and long-term care facility type of services have a longer transition plan. And the reason for that is because we don't want care interrupted, and it allows that person to continue getting their care, especially, I mean, my goodness, if you're having chemo like 3 times a week, you really don't want that interrupted while you find a new cancer treatment center that takes your plan. So, anyway, I digress. So they have this 90-day transition. The key is, though, that their current provider has to be willing to bill their new MCO during this transition, and sometimes providers say no. So that is a challenge, but technically they do have the right to request this. The other thing I want to mention is that the state is paying these managed care plans to offer care coordination services. And it's like care management, getting them access to everything they need, whether that's transportation to medical appointments, prior authorizations for services, help finding a specialist. But sometimes that is harder than you would imagine. Than working with someone, communicating with someone at the Arc of Illinois, which is an incredible advocacy organization for people living with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they've been just having a family having the hardest time getting access to dental care because the adult child needs to be fully sedated for the dental care. And then, yeah, it's just been a real challenge for this family. So but that's technically the care coordinator's job, is to help find those providers and those services. You can find more information than you want probably on the HFS website, kind of this middle bullet here, the care coordination page, you can actually find the actual letters that they send out. We've had a lot of MCO changes lately, a lot, you know, in the last, shoot, I don't know, time's playing a trick on me. So the last several months, I mean, we had Illini Care become Aetna Better Health, and that meant some changes for the folks enrolled in those plans. So you can find all those letters and much more, including sanctions that the plans are under. You can find a map of the managed care plans in the state. And then the third bullet is actually the Association for the Medicaid Health Plans, but they have a lot of helpful information that I think you as providers could use as well. So I've given you that website. And yes. Whoops, that's me. Sorry. Okay, Kristen, I should have just let you guys listen to my recording. Okay, so what happens with redetermination? So sorry about that, guys. So I borrowed those slides from a presentation that I did a voiceover for, and that's what you were hearing. Reads are currently not happening for Medicaid, but they are starting again for SNAP, so just FYI. So as I was saying, once a year, they have to review eligibility for Medicaid. So outside of the pandemic state of emergency, you know, people are sent that form if they need to, if the state needs them to complete it. Even if there's been no changes to their household circumstances, they need to go ahead and return that form. You can also do it in Manage My Case. That's really the best thing to do if they're able to use Manage My Case. But as I said earlier, right now with the Medicaid reads, they're not processing those as usual. You may still see some customers who the state was able to electronically verify everything. We see this a lot for people who are on Social Security benefits and don't really have any change, and it's in their household circumstances. They don't have complex cases. And so they may still process that behind the scenes. It's almost like ABE or IES does it automatically. And HFS has said that the federal CMS, so that's the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, that they will give them at least 60 days notice as to when the emergency will be officially declared over from their side of the world. And then the state will have to have a plan to start processing these redeterminations. So who knows where we'll be by summer, right? As vaccine continues to roll out, but I would say just kind of stay tuned. And I think people are getting confused, honestly, with the SNAP redetermination starting again. So as always, if someone does get a notice, just, you know, when in doubt, the best thing to do is kind of to respond or follow the instructions in the notice as best they can. Okay, so it is 4:09. I just have a couple of more slides because I thought it would be helpful to talk about resources for uninsured, and in particular, this goes along with our maybe undocumented and uninsured population. If you have any other questions about Medicaid, I know that was a lot of information. Please enter those in the chat, but I'll also open it up for discussion after this section. So we've got a few resources just to walk through. I've kind of held on to these slides for several years now. So if you've attended this training before, you've seen this. But please, let's not forget about the important role that our community health centers play in our communities. Some of you may work for some of these health centers, but really they must serve anyone regardless of immigration status, regardless of ability to pay. To find a clinic, these are HRSA funded clinics. They get an enhanced reimbursement rate for Medicaid. Many of them offer that primary health care, OBGYN, some offer mental health care, pediatrics, much more. You can find a clinic through the HRSA website. Some of the companies in our area, and I apologize because I know I'll forget some, but we've got Access Community Health Network, VNA, I think Asian Human Services in the city, Erie Family Health Center, and there's many more. No, what is it? Is it Near North Health Center? I'm forgetting some of them. So please know that they even issue sliding fee scales, and for folks who are uninsured, they can get primary care. We really want people to find a medical home, because if we can keep them healthy, right, get them primary care services, that hopefully will prevent them from waiting until a problem is so severe that they end up in the high cost emergency room. We also have various free and charitable clinics in the area, and I think I saw Bernice's name on here, and so she works for one out in Crystal Lake. But a number of different charitable clinics where the providers are donating their services, but basically providing medical care to uninsured residents. Then there's different local access programs. So in DuPage County, many of the folks are familiar with Access DuPage through the DuPage Health Coalition. For anyone who's 200% FPL and below and doesn't have access to other health insurance, so primarily our undocumented community members, they are able to sign up for this program, and they get placed with a clinic or a healthcare provider to be able to access primary care. And there's a similar program in suburban Cook. And then Cook County Health and Human Services, Hospital and Health Services has their charity care program, and a very similar kind of program where they place people with one of their clinics for their care. And if you know of other types of access programs, it's kind of like a charity care program in a sense. It's not really health insurance per se. But if you know of those in your area, I know there used to be one in Springfield. I just don't know if it's still operating. And then charity care, actually. So hospitals are required to offer financial assistance in charity care, especially if they want to keep their nonprofit status, and there's different income limits. This application is usually done with the hospital themselves. And there was just a bill introduced in the Illinois General Assembly, House Bill 3232, the Hospital Transparency and Accountability Act, because some hospitals really aren't being so transparent when it comes to the availability of charity care. And it's going to do a number of different things, including making sure that people can even apply for this before the service is scheduled. So stay tuned. I think there'll be some different advocacy efforts around that. There's not a fact sheet yet, but as soon as it's available, I know that'll get out to different channels. But charity care is an option, and if people aren't told about it and they're getting these medical bills, they should ask to speak to the financial counselors at the hospital. Prescriptions are often a challenge, right? So to access prescriptions when you don't have health insurance, and depending what that prescription is, it could be very expensive. So these are just some various resources with some generic prescriptions. You know, some of the big box stores or chain pharmacies will offer quite the discount. And then in DuPage County, we actually have a dispensary of hope. And this is kind of a free pharmacy program. Can't have other forms of health insurance to pay for it. And as of now, you don't necessarily have to be a DuPage resident, but I would definitely call before making the trip out to Wheaton to try to access this program. The other thing is they have a limited formulary, so it might be someone's prescribed a medication that this pharmacy doesn't even have. Income limits, I believe, is 200% FPL and below, but all the information is available on the website. And then if you run into people who have rare disorders, they're, you know, how do you get coverage, especially if they're insured and even or uninsured, but even sometimes when they're insured and it might be such a rare condition that insurance isn't really helping. And so just depending, there might be some different resources. So I've given you a couple websites here. And then I also recently I recently learned of the Illinois Transplant Fund. So, we were talking about kidney failure earlier. Um, the Illinois Transplant Fund is operated through a private foundation. It's kind of through the Gift of Hope organ transplant folks, but it's a nonprofit, separate kind of foundation. And it's for people who don't have a means to pay, don't have health insurance, don't have eligibility for Medicaid, and they need a transplant. They have a lot of information on their website, so I would encourage you to go there because I know sometimes that's a really hard thing. Like, how are you going to pay for this incredibly expensive surgery? Here's some other resources, the usual. And yes, I will send everything out. But with that, thank you so much for your attention. I know that that is a lot of information to deliver by just listening to me talk. So I really, really appreciate it. You may have to give me another week or so. My person is on vacation next week too. I will see if I can figure out what I do. The files are so large for recordings. What we do is we somehow put them on YouTube, but it's kind of like a private YouTube channel. And I just haven't been taught how to do that yet. I've asked twice, but we're all juggling multiple things. So, but know that I will at a minimum be sending out a number of handouts, including the PDF of this presentation, a couple of other handouts. I want to get my PEBT handouts to all of you. So more to come. You are always welcome to email me. And if I don't respond within a couple of days, please feel free to give me a friendly nudge. And with that, my presentation is concluded. If you want to stay on for a little bit, I'm happy to take individual questions. I'm worried I might not have answered something in the chat. Thanks, Geneva, the cloud. So which cloud? I do have Dropbox, but I have challenges sometimes with Dropbox, but that might be something that I email out a link to that. So thanks for that suggestion. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you, everyone. And Veronica got my theme, Avengers. Can't wait for tomorrow's episode of WandaVision, but that's another story. So. All right. Well, I'm not hearing any questions or seeing anything more. So thank you everyone for your attention. Stay tuned and we'll see. I'll probably be offering some more trainings here in the next couple months. So keep an eye on our website or I will probably add you to my email list. But with that, I thank you so much for all that you do. Awesome. Haley, thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm going to end the meeting. Oh, I should stop recording first.